thank you all for being here for this very special occasional public seminar that is going to be delivered by really a very, very prominent thinker, a very prominent scholar in the context of Europe in particular, who has been, many of you would know this anyway, many of you who have been perhaps interested in this new paradigm of interculturalism in general, in particular as it relates to diversity management. And in also how it engages with the multicultural concept as we know it in Australia. You will hear it in a minute from Ricard. There's actually some very interesting debates happening right now in Europe in relation to how these two concepts need to really interact with one another. The extent to which there is overlap, the extent to which there is mutual exclusion, or as a matter of fact, we will hear that they need perhaps to work together to ensure that the broader diversity agenda realizes its full potential. Professor Ricard Zapata-Barrero, who is a professor of actually originally political science and still does political science in the University of Pompeu, Fabra, Barcelona, Catalonia, Spain. He's been really interested in a number of interconnected concepts, as we know them, from political theory, democracy, citizenship, and diversity, and in particular how they relate to the human mobility engendered kind of diversity that we see today, the new manifestations of complex super diversity as we are starting to characterize it. But most importantly, I think the question that Ricard will be reflecting upon today is, have things actually changed so much that we need to have, this is where probably you and I will disagree a little bit, whether we need to have a completely new paradigm that replaces the multiculturalism paradigm, or in fact, the multiculturalism paradigm can only be reinvigorated through fresh lens, and that lens will have to be the intercultural lens. I think this is more in line of what I think and what we are doing here in Australia. Simply because it has not been rejected completely, we still have very strong support towards multicultural policies. So I just wanted to contextualize this very, very important public lecture that Ricard will deliver in relation to what's happening in Europe, but also that it has significant implications for us in Australia as we continue public discussions and public debates on the so-called failures or deficiencies or challenges or obstacles that are facing the multicultural agenda in general. So without further ado, please join me in very, very warmly welcoming Ricard to Deakin. I think he's telling me already he feels like he's a Deakinite and he's getting used to being here. So we might get him to come back in the future and spend more time with us, as there is a lot of work that needs to be done in this space, I think, in my view. Ricard's talk will also try to frame what he calls intercultural citizenship, slightly different from earlier versions of multicultural citizenship, and also very, very different from the normative articulations of citizenship as we came to know it. You know, the citizenship that has perhaps much more contributory rights. You know, you contribute and you receive certain rights in return. So this is much more substantive citizenship that includes how we relate to one another. I think that's in the title of your talk, and hopefully you will be able to talk to it. So Ricard will speak for roughly 40 minutes, 45, and then we'll have a Q&A and discussion. So over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Maria. Then, first of all, I'm very happy to be there, and I really feel sincerely that this warm welcome and the feeling of distance attract me. Because in one way or another, you can walk easily. On the morning, nobody in Europe is awake. Nobody disturb you in email and so on. And then this feeling is quite particular, but I will say that it attracts me a lot. But anyway, I will be interested in my lecture because my lecture is thought in the European context, and then particularly I will be much more also interested in the question for the Australian context. I'm very surprised also that this kind of multicultural backlash that we are in Europe doesn't exist, in particular in Australia, and how this backlash could determine also many of the debates. around diversity. I think this is the main framework that I think we can do the debate afterward. But in any case, I will be maybe 40 minutes. The first thing is just to try to map the intercultural research agenda today, and I will speak particularly, I will be interested in these three main issues. The first one is about intercultural as an emerging policy paradigm within the diversity management debate today, and in particular in relation to multiculturalism, but also to civic nationalism. This is what we call that in Europe. Think about citizenship test in Europe, coming from United States and so on. And then I am also interested in what I call the intercultural citizenship, and then addressing myself in relation to the multicultural citizenship, I would say, narrative that has been dominating the diversity debate during the last decades, from the 90s of the last century. And then also I will speak about what I will call the methodological interculturalism, which is maybe much more epistemological, but very important for me, because it tried to take the distance from the what we call the methodological nationalism. And then the relation between methodological nationalism and multiculturalism is very clear for me, and I will try to connect them. One of the problems of multiculturalism is not only that there is an elite and public discourse against constructed discourse, if you want, against multiculturalism, but there are also many epistemological problems, I would say, in multiculturalism related to its relation to the national or methodological nationalism. And this is why, to take this distance, I will speak about methodological intercultural. But I would like to know about your thought about that. In any case, the starting premise, we say that in Western societies today, we are confronted also with diversity management, migration related, for several decades, but today there are different empirical factors that push us to think that multiculturalism has its limits in terms of narrative, in terms of project. And then from this point of view, I will try to present myself the book that I am just now writing, that the main issue of the book will be that the new dynamics related to diversity need a new map. Because the old map called multiculturalism doesn't give answer to xenophobia parties. That does give answer to many of the issues related to diversity today, to super diversity, to transnationalism, to cosmopolitanism, to many different trends today that are put on the debate, and multicultural had many difficulties to give an answer to that. And then from my point of view, the idea will be that new context required also maybe a new conceptual map related and policy map related to diversity. From this point of view, I will take, as Feti has already said, the perspective of citizenship. And particularly, my main aim is to enter in debate with the multicultural citizenship debate that has dominated also I will say mainly the European debate, with different actors that I will try to introduce, Ricard, Parek, and so on. And but also the idea of citizenship that I will have is mainly analytical. I am myself from citizenship studies, and then I will not enter in the citizenship debate particularly. Maybe at the end I will have a section about that. But the idea to begin with this perspective is that citizenship is what it is required in the society, this kind of common feeling to work and to live together. This is the idea of citizenship that will be the perspective. And then from this point of view, citizenship is the answer of how to live together. And then from this point of view, intercultural citizenship is a particular answer to how to live together. And the particular answer is related to contact. Contact is necessary to have the feeling of living together. If you not contact, then there is difficulties to work and to feel together. And also the idea of citizenship that analytically interests me to work is the idea that I will say it's a social and political identity, citizenship, in any way. And from this point of view, the idea of a common public space is very important. Citizenship is not only a public and national identity, a public and social identity, but it is not only the feeling of living together, but also need a common public space. And the idea of common public space is very important for interculturalism. And then from this point of view, my argument would be that multiculturalism has never thought about public space. There is not a theory of public space, multiculturalism. This is one of the issues that I will try to enter. But given the perspective, the idea is that in this moment, in the debate, we are two main trends. The first one is multicultural citizenship, the second one is national civic citizenship, and then also I will defend the third one, the intercultural citizenship. Don't take the third one as the synthesis of the two ones, and don't take it as in a competitive terms. This is not my purpose to say interculturalism is better than the others. The idea mainly is that intercultural citizenship put the finger in, or the perspective if you want, in some dimension that are, I would say, live in the other perspective, in the multicultural and national scene. This is why, as a matter of synthesis, I will say that the multicultural citizenship is a right-based approach. That means that it is concerned about the distribution of rights, a differentiated right for different people, and then from this point of view, the perspective of right distribution is very important from the multicultural perspective. The national civism is much more related to duties. In the strong form, I will say that the national civism, which is the renovated version of assimilation, will say duties, you cannot give rights before duties. Duties come before, and after immigrants follow duties, then we will give rights. But duties come before, and the duties means language, speaking English if you are in Australia, or speaking the national language if you are in France, and so on, but also some citizenship test, some knowledge about the country where you are, and so on and so on. And then from this point of view, this kind of minimal duties are compulsory before giving rights. This will be in a root form about the national civism. And interculturalism, the basic key idea that I will try now to place within the diversity debate, it is based on contact. That means that it is not only rights, it is not only duties that matters when we are speaking about how to integrate or accommodate difference in the society, but the contact between people are important. Without contact, there cannot be integration. This is the basic idea. Without contact of people from different backgrounds, from different nationalities, from different culture, from different criteria of difference they are behind, then there cannot be integration, there cannot be accommodation of diversity. And then from this point of view, the contact plays a prominent role in what we will call intercultural policy paradigm, promotion of contact. Promotion of contact is very important, and how we justify that contact is good, how we can say that contact is always positive and not negative, what we can produce through contact. All these questions belong to the intercultural agenda. I will say that, and then I will say that to justify intercultural citizenship is also to try to give also to this kind of question related to contact. How to justify contact, how to promote contact, what kind of benefits there are around contact, if it is individual benefits or public benefits, and so on and so on. And then from this point of view, all this question will be with us. I have been working on that. This is a debate that just has happened in comparative migration studies with Tarek Modud, that I know he will be there also. And then we try, with Tarek Modud, for several years, we are trying to promote this kind of debate even among ourselves, we continue to be friends, even if we don't have the same perspective and so on. But I recommend you to go to this debate because there are the key article on interculturalism, the key article on multiculturalism. There are some criticisms and some comments coming from different authors, and at the end we try to do this kind of comments to the comments that we have received and so on. And then most of the idea that I will try to put now and share with you come basically from this article. On the Rajwali, this is very important because here I try to defend the idea that, as Betty has already introduced, that interculturalism is not something that is at odds or conflict or in competitive terms with multiculturalism, but could work together, but as I say, alongside but separate. This is very important to me. And then most of the criticisms that I receive are misleading, I will say, because they are put in the debate in terms of conflict. I will say that this is not, I will say, the reason of why multicultural and intercultural has been put forward at the beginning in conflicted terms, maybe is related to the beginning of the intercultural paradigm with Kandel and Wood that present interculturalism in conflicted terms. And then I will say that myself, I try to separate myself from this first authors that are quite problematic in terms of interculturalism replace multiculturalism, multiculturalism must disappear. This kind of debate are not in my language. My language will be that we can work together but separately. This is the main idea in this article. And then there are several also ideas coming from my last work. This one was done in Montreal in my sabbatical year in Montreal, and then with Bouchard and Gagnon I was with them. And then from this point of view, the emphasis put on cities was very important. I will try to. This is also very important. I will try to emphasize that. After the idea that interculturalism is presenting a local tone and is trying to present a pragmatic tone coming from the cities. The cities become an actor in diversity studies. The state become something that where I would say belong to the past, to the methodological nationalism and so on, and the cities become really the real focus on how to manage diversity. Ask to the cities, to Melbourne, how they manage diversity and not to Australia. Because it is the cities that have much more arguments, much more tools to deal with diversity. This is the pragmatic tone that I try to defend in this book also. And then there are other much more, this one is related to this kind of normative analysis. This one is related to a seminar that we held in Barcelona. Discovering that we are diverging with Tarek Mordet, I would say, because we are working together from the very beginning, I would say, but at one moment we separate ourselves and in the perspective of multiculturalism, of diversity and so on, and then we decide why not to put together a different perspective and to begin this debate together. And this is the first book, I would say, that tried to put this debate on and try to put this debate from a contextual point of view, because we have several work on Canada, on Quebec, on Latin America, and so on. Not only in Europe, but beyond. And then my book will try to take into account all the argument that I have tried to defend and to put all together, but also to refocus all the arguments in terms of intercultural citizenship. And there will be two main parts. The first part will try to do a diagnosis of the current situation, and then how I see myself, the multicultural, I will say, narrative, the domination of multiculturalism during the last 3 decades, I would say, from the 90s, and also to put that in terms of European context, which is maybe something that need to be compared to Australia. The fact that Feti told me that in Australia there is not this kind of multicultural backlash is very important, because this determines in one way or another the diversity management afterwards. And then from this point of view, my perspective will be in Europe. And then the foundation of intercultural citizenship will be the second part. And in the second part, I will try to introduce the foundation of intercultural citizenship in terms of policy paradigm. And then I take the literature of policy paradigm seriously and try to develop this kind of continuity and change in policy paradigm and the normative side of intercultural citizenship. We need a theory of contact. If we are working on interculturalism, we need a theory of contact. I will try to overview the current theory of contact that are related to interculturalism and my insatisfaction of some of them, from Wood, from Kandel, and others. And then I will try also to connect intercultural citizenship with tradition of citizenship. My former work has been on citizenship, and then I know the communitarian citizenship, the liberal citizenship, and the republican citizenship. And what I see is that intercultural citizenship has some feature with republican citizenship. I will try to defend that also as a matter of chapter. And also at the end, my main question will be, it's a very important question, because depending on the answer on the evidence-based approach that we have, then I will say the intercultural policy paradigm will be incorporated definitively in the debate or will disappear. The public benefit is very important. What is distinctive to the intercultural policy is also the public benefit they are behind. And there are several studies that try to put forward the public benefits, not only because interculturalism reduces xenophobia, reduce negative public opinion, but also it's a matter of creativity, of innovation in the city, as we will see later. And then, coming from that, I will say that when I speak about the new context, what is important for me is not only to avoid this kind of criticisms that a multicultural backlash has been a public and ideological construction coming from elites, I will say in Europe, from Merkel, Cameron, Sarkozy, and some others political leaders that announce the end of multiculturalism and so on. This is one part of the story, but it is not all the story. And then we cannot take for granted only this story. My idea will be also that there are many evidences on political factors today that cannot be answered with the multicultural narrative. I am speaking not only about the refugee crisis, welfare chauvinism, I am speaking about xenophobic political party, second generation. What does multiculturalism say about the second generation? The relation between second generation and fathers, second generation with second generation of other nationalities, or even with a new generation, and so on. From this point of view, multicultural has nothing about that. Even when we speak about what we call the invert globalization, that means the growing pattern of renationalization of ideology and so on. All this new factor, the security factor is very important. For Kim Lieke is very important because he assumed that multicultural has been thought under the premise that security was not a problem. But when security becomes a framework of our societies today, then security must and has to be incorporated in diversity debate. And then from this point of view, multicultural has many difficulties to deal with that. This is evidences beyond the public construction, but there are also other debates that I will say that frame this new context. This new context is also because in diversity debate there are new dynamics that are put forward by different fields of research. Transnationalism is one. That say that we have multiple identity, that people could have many affiliation, national affiliation with 2, 3 nationalities. What's happened with the transnational people that are mixed marriage? What are the children? The children could have 3 or 4 national affiliation. This is transnationalism, and then this common trend, multiculturalism. If they distribute right and protect difference, what difference if there are 4, 5? It is very difficult to apply multiculturalism in this case. And then from this point of view, transnationalism becomes something important to take into account. Cosmopolitan is very important. The fact that there are many patterns that go beyond the national attachment. And then from this point of view, we are not only speaking about human rights, but we are speaking about many ways to relate each other beyond the national-based approach that is defended by multiculturalism. And we are speaking about superdiversity also. Superdiversity becomes something very important because it is some kind of diversification of diversity. It welcome, for me, it welcome what we call the intersectoriality of diversity. How to relate language with religion, how to relate legal status with nationality. Most of the legal status depends on the nationality of the people. And then from this point of view, superdiversity say that diversity is much more complex than has been thought, but and then invite us to relate each other in terms of gender, in terms of class, in terms of nationality, but it goes beyond the national-based approach that has been one of the case of multiculturalism. And then from this point of view, these new trends invite us to rethink and to remap the diversity debate. And then interculturalism belongs to this dynamic and share most of the diagnosis of transnationalism, cosmopolitanism, and superdiversity. And this will be also one of my arguments. And then I will say that from inside multiculturalism, I place myself from inside multiculturalism in terms that the criticism that I am doing to multiculturalism is not done because I am outside, but it is because I am inside multiculturalism, I come from inside multiculturalism that I see that multicultural project as is limit today, and need to be rethought or, as I say, reboot in terms of interculturalism. And then from this point of view, this is something that Kim Ricard recognized. Even Kim Ricard recognized that most of the most interesting criticisms of multiculturalism come from inside multiculturalism, not outside. And then this is for me very important to take into account, because my concern is not to present interculturalism as something in competitive terms. It is something that could go along multiculturalism, but put the finger on the perspective in others that has been completely forgotten by multiculturalism. And I try also to identify the limits of multiculturalism in the current context, as I put that in the public context, from epistemological point of view, but also from a political and social point of view. And then from this point of view, there have been many books on multiculturalism, many books from the 90s. These are the main cookers, I would say, of multicultural approach, the multicultural project, and so on. And what I try to do in the first part of the book is try to make a diagnosis of this multicultural project, coming from Taylor, I would say Taylor, Kim Ricard, but even, can you imagine this book today? No editor will do it, because we are all multiculturalists now. It's impossible to say New Europe. Even the topic say it is very difficult to be associated with the M word. It is very difficult today. But it was one day in the last part of the century. This was multicultural was a fashionable, I will say, concept, project, and so on. And then my idea is that we are reached the limits of this project. And most of the limits is because it has not produce what it promised. This is the main problem. He promised us a just society. He promised us equality. He promised us so many things that in reality doesn't happen. After 3 decades of application, what's happened to multiculturalism? What's happened? And then beginning with that, there have been some different debates. I'll try to put that in terms of different periods. I will say that in the 90s, the beginning of multicultural approach with Kim Lika and Tyler and so on, I will say this kind of political recognition, we need to recognize difference. And this difference must be protected through right as a matter of compensation and so on. Most of the thinkers, and this is very important to me, because the intercultural project is completely different. The multicultural project, most of the thinkers come from a former communitarian liberal debate on justice. And then they think on diversity in terms of justice. They incorporate the diversity within the framework of justice and equality. And it is within this framework that they built the multicultural project. And then this is why multiculturalism is thought in terms of right distribution, equality, and also justice, a just society. Multiculturalism is presented always in normative terms as a just society. And then one of the main concerns of Kim Lika and others are always been, from the very beginning, how to make compatible this idea of justice with liberalism. This has been because to think about diversity is to think in group terms, in collective terms. And liberalism is much more individualistic. And then how to make compatible that. And then from this point, this is the beginning. And then I say that because this background is not innocent. It's very important to take that into account because they promise us too many good things that at the end, after 3 decades, the diagnosis is that where is the just society of? What's happened? What's happened with multiculturalism? What's happened to that? And then from this point of view, the first critics, I will overview that more slowly in the book, but in any case, just to take the idea that there are different stages. The first critic in the 2000s, with Barry, Brubaker, and so on, try to put on the idea of the naturalization of the essentialist view of culture. That means that multiculturalism think that culture is naturalized, and then people cannot change culture. Then they see diversity in fixed term, in this term. And then the process of multicultural has always been to try to incorporate this criticism. And in some sort of biological logic, that I incorporate this criticism and then I renew multicultural project incorporating this criticism. This has always been the rule. The first one is essentialist, but also the diagnosis that multiculturalist files today in welfare state, the idea of linking difference, culture, nationality with a social class, socio-economical equality, diversity as a driver of socio-economical. Then all these criticisms that come after also has been difficult to answer by multiculturalists that only see society in terms of culture or nationality in state terms, I will say, from this point of view. And then I try to review all that, and even I will say there have been the last stage will be to try, even in 2012, beginning to see multicultural in terms of indicators. After 2 decades of multicultural project, they take awareness that they need indicators to give evidences of multiculturalism. And then this is very important to take into account because for me, this is the last stage where multiculturalism tries to have a solid basis to be convincing to others, to convince others. And then, and if we analyze the different proposals of indicators and to try to have this kind of evidence-based approach of multiculturalism that begins in the 2010s, I will say, then it is very, very interesting because we have evidences on how multiculturalism can be thought not in terms of principles, not in terms of values, but in terms of indicators, which is quite different when you think about a concept, about indicators. And then from this point of view, we see that multicultural policies is always seen as a protection against the mainstream. I need to protect people because they are different, and mainstream, if I don't protect them, then the mainstream will be something that will limit the opportunities and the equality of these people. And the idea of protection is very important to take into account. There are other indicators, even Bantin and Kilblicker try this kind of multicultural index. If you analyze multicultural index, you will understand many things. First, it is a state-based approach, no cities. It is a state-based approach. It is a national. It belongs to the methodological nationalism. Multiculturalism, I will say, is the last proposal belonging to the to the methodological nationalism. That is thinking on diversity with a unit of analysis of unity, nationalism, and state. And from the state, I think diversity. And then from this point of view, you see the different indicators that come also in terms of content of sectionality, affirmative action, group-based support, and so on. Other indicators also from Vertovec that try also to think in terms of indicators the concept of and the approach of multiculturalism in much more practical terms, I would say. Even he himself is not multiculturalist from this point of view, but always taking the idea of specificity, of grounding specific policies, specific arrangement, specific institutions, specific legal, and so on and so on. And then from this point of view, this is what is problematic, I will say today. But the overview of the multicultural narrative is always the same, that it tries to legitimize specific policies, think about diversity in justice, equality, and right-based approach, always distributing rights. It's the only solution on diversity management, and always group-based, thinking of people in terms of group. This is the main criticism of Brubaker, but for me it's very important. You cannot assume that because you come from Morocco, you are Muslim. You cannot assume that. You cannot assume that because you are Morocco, you will do the Ramadan, or because you are Filipino, you will have from the behavior of the people does not depend on birth, does not depend on nationality. And then from this point of view, this taken for granted idea of multicultural, this group-based approach make a problem. In analyzing diversity complexity today, super diversity, transnationalism, cosmopolitanism, all these new trends of diversity make problematic if we want to approach it with the multicultural lens. This is the main argument afterwards. And then from this point of view, the national civic turn come as a reaction to that. The first reaction against, I will say, this approach come from assimilation, I will say a renovated version of that is called national civics. That put, in terms of diversity, unity relation, that put the emphasis on unity, not on diversity, but on unity. What is the minimal that we require to live together? A common language. Then language is belong to national civic tone. What is the minimal? The human rights. Then human rights belong to civil tone. And then what is the minimal that we require? And it is unnegotiable. Gender issue is unnegotiable. That belongs to the national civic tone. And then the national civic tone try to put the emphasis that not only rights but duties are important when diversity management, and then from this point of view try to also to identify what are the minimal standards of duties that are required beyond the differences. And then from this point of view, the test of citizenship in Europe has been founded and theorized along the idea of national civic tone. And the national civic term are a state and a city also level. It is a multi-level policy, I would say, but I have no time to go into that, but it is a very interesting trend that try also to give answer to the deficits of multicultural project. This kind of deficit. And then from this point of view, there are many work from Brubaker, Jobke, also Brubaker has done many work on that. Even Stephen Bortavek, when the idea of multicultural backlash comes from this book, that try also to relate not only public discourse but practice and policy together. And then from this point of view, the idea of multicultural backlash is not only an elite public construction by Merkel, Sarkozy, and Cameron, but it is a fact in diversity study. This is very important to take that into account because sometimes the multiculturalists try to justify that it is a political construction. It is not only a political construction. It is beyond that. And then from this point of view, I will say that we are, and here I begin my argument, we are in a post-multicultural period. The post-multicultural period means that multiculturalists become aware of the limits, become aware, it is some kind of proof of reality, that become aware that the project and the promise that multiculturalism put forward, the debate, cannot be met, because of more of the contextual circumstances, more of political circumstances and social circumstances. And then from this point of view, this awareness that the multiculturalism has its limits is very important to take into account. And then most of the multiculturalists today try to solve this problem of limits inside. And then this belongs to the post-multicultural period where multiculturalist by itself is trying to reboot itself given the circumstance of the limits that they don't offer what they promised. And then they are trying to think about the epistemological, I will say, assumption they are behind. And this is the exercise that interculturalism is inviting to do. If interculturalism is forcing to multiculturalists to rethink themselves, then interculturalism will win. I would say this in this case. The fact that Tariq Modud is fighting to rethink and to justify multiculturalism is because there is a pressure of interculturalism. There is a pressure in conceptual terms. And then I will try to identify what are the drivers of this pressure. What are the drivers of this pressure? And then from this point of view, okay, I wanted to speak about this kind of public discourse, just to take into account that it is not only public discourse, but for instance, can the narrative of multiculturalism counter the extremist narrative? Today, there are many difficulties. Multiculturalism has no tools to give answer to the extremism, to give answer to the xenophobic political parties, and so on. Because multiculturalism has never incorporated even, from this point of view, the conflict related to racism, to prejudices, and so on. Multiculturalism has had another target. Identify, a very simple target. Identify differences to protect differences through rights. Nothing more than that, I will say. But they forget relations. They forget contact. And then from this point of view, there have been the idea of boundless multiculturalism will come. And then once the diagnosis has been done, I need to enter within the intercultural debate. And then my purpose is how the debate enter in Europe. I am fully aware that interculturalism is not new in the diversity migration studies in general. Interculturalism has been a policy and political proposal in Quebec against the multicultural Canada. It has also in Australia, it has also its dimension in terms of dialogue. Even in Mexico, towards in Latin America in general, interculturalism has been the policy proposal to deal with the diversity related to indigenous people. And then interculturalism is not new. I am not defending it is new. But in Europe, it has not been theorized. And here it is my purpose. How interculturalism enter in Europe and what are the distinctive features of interculturalism in Europe in comparison to others, to other versions of interculturalism. And then from this point of view, if we analyze European Europe, we see that in the intercultural year in 2008, the beginning of the Council of Europe Intercultural Program, it is in 2008, very recently, 10 years ago, nothing more than 10 years ago. Then, if we analyze the intercultural year, we see that interculturalism is the concept of interculturalism in Europe are 3 dimensions. The first one is relation between states. Relation between France and Spain, relation between Germany and England. Interculturalism is the relation between nations. And then we speak about intercultural Europe or intercultural European citizenship. We are speaking about a citizen that is related, the French related to German and so on. This is the idea of interculturalism, completely different with the framework we are working on. The second one is interreligion, the relation between Europe and Asia, Europe and Africa, Europe and United States. This kind of relation is also conceptualized as intercultural. In the intercultural dialogue program in 2008, these are the 2 dimensions that has been developed. But there is a third dimension that was mentioned, but not developed. It is the interculturalism related to immigrants. Completely forgotten by Europe in 2008. If they are the Council of Europe that developed the intercultural program, it is because Europe, when we speak about Europe, take into account we are speaking about the union of states. And the states are not intra-state in incorporating the immigration and diversity migration related in Europe. And then from this point of view, there is a deficit. There is a deficit of interculturalism in the term of migration related that we are doing that. And then if we take the idea of Europe, how Europe is being constructed, it is constructed under the national, the methodological nationalism. It is a state picture of Europe. It is the state that are constructing Europe. And then it is through the state that Europe is being constructed, ignoring most of the diversity coming from migrants. And then from this point of view, there are a lot to do. When we are speaking about intercultural Europe, then we are a lot to do from this point of view. I wanted to show that, for instance, Gérard Bouchard, but this picture is very interesting because we see that Quebec has this view of relation between majority, unity, and diversity. This is the idea of interculturalism in Quebec that is not working in Europe. The vertical view of interculturalism, the relation between unity and diversity, majority and minorities. This is Kim Lika, this is most of the idea of multiculturalism also come from this idea of majority and minority. And then in Europe, the idea is completely different. It is much more horizontal, social dimension, as I will defend. The 3 avenues that I think could be put forward as a 3 avenue of interculturalism in Europe come first by the Council of Europe, that in 2008 opened the Intercultural Cities Program. By the way, the city approach becomes important, the local town becomes important. We have to think diversity not in state terms, but in city terms. And the city terms think diversity in terms of proximity, macro politics, neighborhood, public space, and all these terms, multicultural has not answered. Multicultural has not been thought. It has been thought as a state policy, not at the city policy. Not at the city policy. Even integration programs, Fabra told us that the methodological nationalism belong also integration has been thought in state terms, but not in city terms. From this point of view, there are a lot to do. And then there is also Phil Hood and Cantel that I will try. The Council of Europe, 2000. In this moment, 121 cities working together and following the intercultural program, an intercultural approach. This is very important to take into account because there are much more cities than states. There are much more cities than states. How many cities there are in Europe? There are much more cities than states. And the city approach is becoming a view that I will speak about the intercultural methodology in terms of city approach also. To think about diversity, beginning, but not by unity, but diversity. Beginning, mainly the unit of analysis will be diversity. Will not be nation, will not be state, but will be diversity. To think diversity within, diversity in these terms. And then there is this kind of manifesto that I invite you to go, living together as equal in dignity. This kind of manifesto in 2008 put the main argument of the intercultural city program. And this manifesto is important because it is an ad hoc document of Europe, because it belongs to the Council of Europe, but the Council of Europe in any case is trying to incorporate a new dimension of interculturalism that, as we have seen, Europe doesn't follow, the city approach. And then from this point of view, one of the problems of the manifesto, if I may say problem, it builds interculturalism as a conflict and competitive terms in terms of multiculturalism. And I will try to go beyond that. But this has been the first. And then there are many documents. You have to take into account, for instance, the Committee of Ministers in 2000, I remember that, in 2015, this has been the first key date where the European Commission recognized that interculturalism could be something interesting to follow, because the Council of Europe is pressing European Union. But it is very recent, it's 3 years ago. 3 years ago. And then from this point of view, the idea, the second avenue is Ted Kandel. Ted Kandel, if you know him, has been the result of a request by Tony Blair. Tony Blair requested him that the main question of Tony Blair to Ted Kandel, and I certify because I know very well Ted Kandel. The first question is that there was some conflict in several cities in England. And Tony Blair was, but if we are a multicultural society, well, there are conflicts. We are the model of multiculturalism. England is the model. Then we are not expecting conflict. What's happened? I need a report. And ask Ted Kandel, please give me a report. Just answer this question, why there are conflicts? Because multiculturalists tell me that we are the model. What's happened? And Ted Kandel's answer was lack of contact. Lack of contact between people. Lack of knowledge between people. And we need to put the perspective, the policy perspective, not on right distribution, but on contact. Fostering contact is very important. And this is the idea of community cohesion. The idea of contact is very important. And this is the name of interculturalism. Interculturalism is trying to put the finger or the perspective in contact. The contact means contact between Morocco and Chinese people. Try to make a diagnosis in Melbourne and how many contacts there are between people from different backgrounds. This is the intercultural lens, I would say, from this point of view. Okay, maybe 5 minutes. Okay, I will take 5 minutes. Okay, and then The second one is fieldhood. Fieldhood has a different avenue. The third avenue where interculturalism entered in Europe. And fieldhood offers us not the idea of community cohesion, the idea that contact is important to build a community cohesion, but the idea of benefits. The diversity concept is completely different. And this allows us to think that the concept of diversity put forward by multiculturalism has been a unity of nations, or a plurality of units of nations within the society without contact among them. All are different and we distribute right differently to different units of nations. But no contact is related. And then Wood will say that we need to rethink the diversity. We need to rethink diversity in terms of benefits. Diversity could be a driver of social transformation, could be a driver of creativity, could be an advantage, not a conflict, but an advantage. And then from this point of view, the idea of Wood was to put the focus on the concept of diversity, completely different from Kandel that put, I will say, the focus on community cohesion and contact. Contact is important for fieldhood because it produces something different. It is an innovation. It produces something different. And most of the chapters of this book try to articulate what are the benefits of this or diversity when you manage contact from this point of view. And then I wanted to say also about the local tone, but I will go beyond that. I will go beyond that also because I am much more interested. Okay, I will say that, let me just a few arguments about the European, the intercultural tone in Europe. The idea today is that in Europe we need to reboot the idea of Europe, the European identity. It is completely, and European citizenship is completely, I will say, under it is completely negative in this moment. And then from this point of view, there are few proposals to try to reboot the idea of the European identity. And then the only proposal that we have is what is called Cosmopolitan Europe. And there is a debate about the Cosmopolitan Europe that try to rethink European identity beyond the state-based approach, which has been the main focus of European citizenship, of European identity, and so on, beyond the state-based approach and beyond, I would say, the racial and ethnic approach of diversity. And then from this point of view, the literature related to Cosmopolitan Europe is quite interesting because they give us arguments that is shared by the intercultural Europe that we are trying to construct. And most of them, because the diagnosis of multiculturalism, the diagnosis of Europe identity that has been built under the state image and picture is completely overlapping from this point of view. And then from this point of view, I defend the idea of methodological interculturalism. The idea of, I will go quick, I wanted to speak about the contact, but I'll go there. The idea of the intercultural lens or intercultural methodology means that instead the methodological nationalism main idea is that the unit of analysis of thinking about diversity is national, is the nation. Is the unity, is national citizen, is the state. And then from there, from this balcony, I analyze the reality. The intercultural methodology proposes a completely different balcony. Not the state, but the city balcony, and the beginning by the diversity. Diversity is the norm, is not the exception. And unity disappears. Only diversity matters. And then from this point of view, the way we think about diversity, if we begin the premise by unit of analysis of diversity, completely different. And then this idea of interculturalism is also shared by other trends in diversity studies. Transnationalism, cosmopolitanism, and superdiversity. All of them are against the methodological nationalism, share the diagnosis of multiculturalism, and place importance to the macropolitics, diversity management, the place, the public space, and so on. And then from this point of view, I will say that the criticism of multiculturalism is much more deep. Is much more deep in terms that what we are saying is that multiculturalism is a product of methodological nationalism. Is the last product. And it is very important to take that into account, because if we want to go beyond multiculturalism, we need to go beyond this methodology of thinking diversity from the state point of view, or thinking diversity from the nation point of view. And then we have to, the main framework of thought of diversity will disappear, or will not disappear, I don't like to use this term, but in any case will be put in doubt. Two main frameworks, unity, diversity. We cannot think diversity in these terms. Unity and diversity relation. Because all is diversity in this moment. I have many difficulties to identify unity. Unity for me, a national-based approach, for me is the new romanticism. What is Frenchness? What does Australian mean? It is something completely theoretical, but doesn't exist in the reality. You cannot construct an ideology on virtualities. Diversity is the rule, and unity is only what is necessary to live together. But unity is separate from nationality. It's completely different. And then this framework must disappear. Another framework that has to disappear is the majority-minority relation. The majority, what does majority mean in a diverse society? Where are the majorities? The majority-minority is only thought and only useful in power relation, but nothing more than that. But majority-minority, it is, these two framework has been the two framework on how multicultural project has been framed. And the intercultural, methodological interculturalism try to break this framework. Trying to say this framework are the old map, and we cannot use old map with new routes. We cannot use that. And then this is very important to take that into account. And then I will say that multiculturalism has no answer to that. Has no answer. There is not a transnational theory of multiculturalism. Multiculturalists avoid to theorize transnationalism because they know that transnationalism put the focus on different issues that multicultural concept and project cannot solve. What happened to multiple identity and so on. And this is, I think, for me, very important to take into account. And nothing more, because I will have the question, but maybe the idea of, contact was very important.
Can perhaps touch on that discussion?
On the discussion, but something can ask about contact, and then I will show you because how contact is being theorized in this moment in interculturalism is very important to take into account, because I'm fully aware that you cannot defend the intercultural policy paradigm without a theory of contact. And then from this point of view, the proposal that we have had about contact in this moment are very, very few and very limited. And I think here it is very important to theorize contact in terms of what contact can produce and why contact is important, because somebody could argue that why I have to relate with the Chinese. I don't want to be related to China. And then from this point of view, there are many arguments that can put forward. I'm sorry for that. But
no, thank you very much. I think it shows that we need more than just one lecture for you to be able to talk to us about the various interconnected issues that arise in this very, very hotly debated space. I'm sure that we have a lot of questions, but can I just kickstart on where you stopped? I think, and this is some of the issues that you and I talked about, but they would really worth clarifying again, very briefly, if you don't mind. So I think one of the questions is, you talked about the backlash against multiculturalism in Europe. For a lot of people who are not really wedded into any particular school of thought and who are just dealing with and engaged in relation to diversity, it's really problematic to say a multicultural backlash when, for instance, in Germany, there's no such a thing as multiculturalism policy. Even in the UK, it's a bottom-up multicultural policy, but really does not have any policy tools. And then France, of course, there's no such thing as multiculturalism in France. Yet this multiculturalism backlash that we hear about all the time in Europe seems to be gathering momentum in a way that's extremely difficult for us to grasp and understand, because it's contradictory. How do you have a backlash against something that doesn't exist? There's multi-ethnic societies in Europe, there's diversity management programs, but there's no such a thing as a multiculturalism in terms of policy frameworks. We have it here in Australia. Canada had it for a different reason. As you know, Canadian multiculturalism was really aimed at managing the Quebec question. We had a multicultural policy in Australia which is aimed at supporting migrant integration. And then it changed and evolved. So that's one of the key things, I think, and you know this, that is one of the key problems that multiculturalists see with this discourse on backlash. But my question on contact, you can reflect on that first point, but my question on contact, similar to the concerns that I see proponents, perhaps, talk about you cannot push an agenda of equality in terms of group-based claims, because you can't force someone within a group to actually make those claims. They're free to, for instance, say that I'm not practicing Muslim, or they're free to say I do not want to be identified as, to the same extent that you say that the same criticism is directed at IC in relation to contact. You cannot force people to interact. And you cannot force people to come together. People may choose to live in what you might perceive to be segregation. So if we talk about liberal approaches to diversity in relation to this particular contact issue, you also have to accept that that is not something that you can defend or argue robustly, because the empirical reality would say that it can happen differently if you leave people to choose. I'm not saying that it's good or bad. We're not here in the process of arguing. So I think I wanted to ask that question on contact, because I think I throw it back at you, but also in relation to really needing to differentiate multiculturalism as a political idea, as a set of policies, but also as a public set of discourses that talks about diversity, which are not the same thing. And this is probably where you and I agree that both need to exist, but multicultural proponents would always defend against some of these, what I perceive to be methodological contradictions in this discourse. So you can, maybe you take it as notes and we open up, or you might want to come back to them once we hear more questions, so it's up to you.
Then I wait.
Okay. Do you want to take them together? Let's take a few questions together.
It's about contact theory. I lived in Sarajevo for 6 years, and I think the issue of contact is really interesting in former Yugoslavia, because ethnically, nationally, it was Yugoslavia, it was Slavic. And if we're talking about contact, you could see intercultural marriage, inter-ethnic marriage, interreligious marriage, and then we have genocide. So I'm just wondering how contact is going to make the world very peaceful.
Produce positive outcomes.
Yeah.
So let's take a few very succinct questions and we'll come back to Ricard. Yes, Zahid?
I'm thanks for a fantastic talk, but I'm skeptical of the contact theory and its application based on my own experience evaluating dozens of interfaith dialogues in Pakistan. I many times concluded by saying that they were doing more damage than good, because people were not prepared for those dialogues, and all these religious leaders that were brought together, they ended up leaving those dialogues with their stereotypes strengthened and actually removed. So I'm skeptical based on my own experience.
Ricard will tell you dialogues are contact anyway. Yeah. He will tell you that, because I know he's going to say that. I know that too. Any more questions? Malena?
Just a question in terms of power. You were very critical of multiculturalism because it doesn't account for power. But how do you account for power relations? Especially when you're saying that there's not a majority and a minority divide. But I think for a lot of women and for a lot of people of color, for a lot of people of migrant backgrounds, that would be a very problematic, that is a very problematic statement. So how do you account for power relations in theory, but also in practice, in context?
In intercultural, you mean? Or?
Yeah.
Intercultural. So I think we've got 4 or 5 questions now. You want to reflect on those, and then we come back for another 5.
No, but at least there are several questions that are putting the finger in the same,
Exactly,
same place,
yes.
I would say. The first one is about the backlash. Huh?
Yes.
Somebody said that it is the last fake news. In the,
Fake news.
In the term that it has been a construction of Europe, and then from this point of view, we are to be very preventive of that. But the idea that I have tried to put is not to discuss if there is a backlash, if there are reasons of this backlash or not. I am not putting the evidences of the backlash. I am putting the narrative. I am always speaking about the narrative. And then from this point of view, the narrative of the backlash exists. The narrative of backlash has an effect on diversity debate today. And then from this point of view, it is this evidence that are my main concern in this moment. The effect of the narrative of the sentence that Merkel says multiculturalism is death is being matter of PhD thesis. The effect of this narrative. And that even if behind that there is not evidences, because there is a contradiction between Germany not following the multicultural, and then people and the public discourse say that people could have this confusion and elite construct this confusion and so on. And then this evidence for me is important to take that into account. I am always speaking about narrative. This is maybe one part of my answer, but the other part of my answer, as I try to insist, is that beyond the public narrative, there are other reasons to discuss the limit of multiculturalism. And I try to put not only the elite construction of the multicultural backlash, but the reason put forward by some multiculturalists. Even Kimlicka is recognizing the limit of multiculturalism. There are many authors that try to give evidences that the multicultural project is not offering what he promised us. A just society in general, an equal society, and so on. And then from this point of view, we can speak about backlash in these terms, or the limit, what I say, boundless multiculturalism, in terms that multiculturalism was not aware of these limits, and then the post-multicultural period is a period where multiculturalism takes awareness of its limits, that nothing could be done in terms of justice, inequality, and so on. And then from this point of view, I'm not sure if you are satisfied with that, but for me, the backlash, even if it is not something that exists on contradiction, because as you say, most of the proponents of the multicultural death has been done by political elites in a country that multiculturalism was not present, and that it's completely absurd or paradoxical, if you want, to do that. But the fact that the effect of this narrative I've had is what interests me. And this narrative exists and belongs also to the reality. And this is the power of narrative, I would say. But I would say from this point of view, narrative matters in policy. Narrative matters. And why this narrative has been done, maybe it is related to terrorist attack, maybe it's related to the xenophobic emergence, maybe it is related to many evidences that put forward at least the elite to build this kind of narrative. But from my point of view, I am always jumping between the narrative and the policy. This is the book of Vertovec, The Backlash of Multiculturalism, is working multiculturalism at the 3 levels: the level of public narrative, the level of policies, and the level of politics also, which is very important to take into account. And then from this point of view, he concludes in one way or another that the backlash exists even if it is I will say today, a fake news in terms that it is completely virtual because in Germany they have not been multicultural. This is the first answer to my question. The second one was related to, just remember me.
What was it related to, sir?
Contact.
Contact. Many questions on contact, yes.
I think there is something that we need. I try to emphasize, but maybe there is a need to emphasize more. The theory of contact is not forcing people to contact. It's offering the conditions of contact, which is completely different. Take into account today. Today, people have difficulty to contact with other people from other because there are prejudices, because there are stereotypes, because there is a racism. Racism prevents contact. And then interculturalists make a diagnosis of diverse society, and in this case, I will accept the idea that intercultural policy paradigm try to justify policy intervention. Why intervention is important, that no intervention. Intervention is important because without intervention, there is a process of territorialization of culture. That means culture is related to a territory, or a district, a street, and so on. But if there is not intervention, then diversity could be, this is Putnam, let's say, without intervention, then there is conflict. Diversity in the current circumstance without intervention could provoke conflict between people from different backgrounds and so on and so on. And then interculturalism try to justify why contact is important, but is not forcing people to contact. It's only working in simple ways, but the idea is only putting on the conditions of contact. The conditions in contact are important, and the fact that there are people in diversity that have no contact among them is what interculturalism drive what he called conflict. Conflict is the fact that there are not circumstances of contact. And then, but from this point of view, there is a big, I would say, a step when I am not defending that you must contact with somebody else and so on. No, as a policy, from a policy point of view and from a city point of view, you must think the public space in terms of the condition of contact, or the condition of, which is quite different from the point of view. And then the example that you give to me, I am unable to answer because I don't really know the circumstance of contact in these countries. But I guess that the contact is thought in terms of religion and ethnic and so on. And then from this point of view, I am completely unable to say that this kind of Balkanization of diversity that happened in the ex-Yugoslavia, in Sarajevo, and in other countries and so on. And then from this point of view, maybe we need to analyze them to prevent arguments that could happen in Europe in this time, and then the comparative studies could be interesting. But my perspective is that the kind of contact that I am not sure if contact were promoted in this country. But if the contact were promoted and the condition of contact were promoted, the fact that there were a war between different, you can go in Africa, you have other examples in Africa, not necessarily to go to this country, in Africa also. My perspective is that the ideology and the politics, it is what problematize contact in this time on conflict and so on. And then from this point of view, it is quite different from Europe. From my point of view, it is quite different. But comparative studies on the promotion of contact, and if the contact has been an ideology in ex-Yugoslavia, then I will be interested to see that. I know that in Jakarta, for instance, also there are some promotion of contact. But from this point of view, it is quite different of the contact that I am trying to put in Europe. It is not contact in terms of religion. Religion could be one kind of contact, but not all the contact. Contact in public school, in the market, in neighborhood, this kind of thing are beyond the idea of dialogue in terms of religion and so on. But I will be happy to learn more about these countries.
Linda.
One of the big problems we have in our country with contact is class. And the elites and the politicians with closed ears on many, many issues. So I'm just wondering to what extent the model you're putting takes enough account. I know you talk about the failure of multiculturalism being a failure of realising a just society and an equal society, but at the same time, how does what you're proposing actually account for the fact that so many policies are made by elites who have their own self-interests, which are not necessarily based, it's more about money and power. And also that's where transnationalism comes in a more perverse way, rather than the way that you're pointing out. I'm just wondering where that fits, because you didn't get through.
You mean the class category?
I mean the dominance of the ruling class, basically, the political class. So if you're promoting an intercultural as opposed to a multicultural model, where does it fit that one of the major divides in our society that influences people's lives and the lives in these cities, in the city work and so on, is the nature of power elites and political power elites?
Okay, maybe I take some.
We have about 3 minutes left, so we can take another question then.
So continue on that. So there's so many ways people identify with each other. So this is elites and liberal and conservatives and women and religion. And so the identity issue, how does the contact take into account all the way people identify themselves with someone who doesn't have to be the same country, or so identity is something that built up during the childhood and
this is super diversity.
Yeah. So how the contact take into account all of that when it's class and genders and religions and everything.
This is the idea of super diversity, maybe related to the first question. The idea of super diversity means that there are many criteria of diversity, and we need to go beyond the idea that diversity could only be conceptuated in terms of national identity or ethnic identity or race identity. It is a post-racial, post-national, and post-state. And then the idea of super diversity means that the criteria to conceptualize diversity is complex. It's complex. And what's happened to a homosexual that is black and that is woman, and that what's happened to the multicultural has no answer to that. Because multiculturalism, and you will accept that because it is self-evident, multiculturalism has only thought on diversity in terms of nationality, in terms of culture, and nothing more than that. Yeah, and super diversity try to say that there are legal status, socio-economical differences, gender differences, there are many criteria of differences, even sexual orientation, even disabled people not belong to the mainstream. And then from this point of view, diversity is a very complex and multidimensional. And then he offers us the idea of intersectoriality. We need to put in relation different kind of identity. You cannot do a policy only taking into account your nationality because you are African, and then I will put, or you are a Muslim, because maybe you are Morocco, but you are not Muslim, you are homosexual, and whatever. And then from this point of view, complexity is the new dimension of diversity. And multiculturalism, I say myself, as a unidimensional view of diversity, only in terms of race, ethnicity, and so on. And then from this point of view, what I say is that interculturalism, because they emphasize contact, the contact is between different, but they are not a view of a national-based view of difference. Differences could be between people from different origin, but there can be people from different sexual orientation, there can be people from different legal status, and so on and so on. And then this is the idea of contact, which is quite different from multiculturalism. And then putting emphasis on, I am fully aware that the class dimension is very important. And it has been one of the main problems of multiculturalism, even if there have been some intent to put together the two categories, the recognition and redistribution and so on. There are many difficulties in practical terms. Intercultural, I will say that the question is not correctly formulated. I will say in the term that interculturalism is not a universal policy. It does not give answer to everything and all unjust situation in the society. Interculturalism is only promoting contact and try to theorize why contact is important and so on. But it is fully aware that social class and socioeconomic condition could be a prevention of contact. And it is in this case that he incorporates the category of class. Because social class is a determinant of relation. You are much more related to people of your social condition than others. I put you just a final example that I always put when I receive this kind of question. Morocco has much more affinities. A doctor Morocco has much more affinity with a doctor Argentinian than with a low social class Morocco. Then, how can you put the group-based approach here?
Sure.
Sorry,
The social class matters. This is what I say. A doctor Morocco will have much more relation with a doctor than with a Morocco.
Perhaps. Depends on the doctor.
Depend, of course.
I just came back from Morocco and went
Yes.
to the hospital.
But what I say is that multiculturalism has not taken into account that.
One final
I
observation.
suppose that only Morocco relate to Morocco.
Two
Whatever
very,
social
very quick,
class.
these two.
I just one,
Because
yeah,
we
just
have that,
to it's connected to your question
Okay.
and to this comment you had on the slide. Mocro politics at the core of diversity management, and one of the critiques of multiculturalism and the purpose of proposal for interculturalism is because multiculturalism has failed because it has failed in providing a just society. So how is interculturalism going to provide a just society? Because I think the power issues are not about the public,
like
it's
this
about
question.
governance. Like who's going to engage in diversity management in an intercultural society at a micro-political level?
I like this question because this allows me to put the emphasis on interculturalism, because I put more emphasis on criticism. But interculturalism is not a proposal of justice. It's not a proposal of justice. There are normative dimensions of interculturalism in terms of reducing xenophobia, reducing negative public opinion. This is something that we need to work and so on. But forget the idea that we are proposing a just society. This is the idea. This is what I say, that the multicultural project has been cooked by people that previously were debating a just society between communitarism and liberalism during the 80s. Rawls, Nozick, Walzer, if you know these authors. They were thinking about a just society. The problem with these authors is that they speak about people. Even Rawls speak about people. I say that because my PhD in the 80s was about these authors. And my main question is that what are they proposing to deal with diversity? They are proposing nothing because they are not into account migration. even Rawls speak about the law of people. People, they are not speaking about citizenship, because they are not aware about that. It is this awareness that put Kimlicka, Taylor on the table, and this awareness is called multiculturalism. A proposal of justice to manage diversity. But interculturalism leaves aside this normative justice. We are not defending a just society. This is so too complicated for us. We are just defending a society that can live together in cohesion, in stability, and they are not or reducing conflict. The idea of conflict that interculturalists have is not international conflict. It is racism is conflict. Social class division is conflict. Different legal status. The fact that within the society there are people with different legal status is something very strange in those democratic societies. Then from this, and this difference of legal status could prevent contact. And then this is conflict in this term that interculturalism is, but he is not proposing a just society.
I will
He's
have
not proposing.
I would have to step in as the chair because I'm worried about my next appointment. But can I say that? No, it's all right. Can I say that? I'll say what you did not say, and I know you could have said this, but you didn't say it. There is an acceptance now in these two camps of argument that as much as multiculturalists accept that they have perhaps dropped the ball when it comes to the interpersonal contact and how much that can be actually beneficial to society in relation to issues of racism, in relation to issues of people getting along together, there is also an acceptance in the intercultural camp that issues of social justice have been taken care of normatively in multicultural theory from a political science point of view, and that they need to go hand in hand. I think that's probably one of the arguments that are going to emerge from these debates, simply because the emphasis on the local, the emphasis on the interpersonal, the emphasis on mainstreaming a lot of the migration-specific issues are at the heart of interculturalism, to the extent that multiculturalism has previously been concerned with issues of justice, representation, equality, etc., etc. So I think we just have to accept that those two things will go hand in hand, and that neither approach will try to do everything. And I think this is really what needs to be accepted.
This is what they say, the pragmatic tone.
No, but because you didn't say it, no, I'm just saying it. I'm just trying to articulate it so that people get that they're not in conflict, and this is actually what we agree on. They're not in conflict, they should go hand in hand. And thank God we live in Australia, because in Australia, Ricard, many of my colleagues who are here, we have a multicultural policy, we are a multicultural society, but we also engage in intercultural work. So we do interculturalism in schools, we do interculturalism in local governance. We have just, Caroline is here, did her PhD as part of a larger project on intercultural understanding in schools. So we do not see that the two things actually need to be in an oppositional relationship. For us, it's bizarre that in Europe there's this much heated debate about one excluding the other, or the, is it the
intercultural program? Or?
No. The self-exclusion of the two paradigms we find extremely unhelpful. So on that very and incommensurability, yes. So on that very positive note, and you here in Australia should take that with you, the positive vibe that we have. We're going to bring this fantastic seminar to conclusion. So please thank Ricard for this fantastic comprehensive. And we are hoping that we bring it back for a much longer period of time. So thank you, Ricard. It was really good.